Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. Sophia's journey begins. The airport hummed with the sound of rolling suitcases, flight announcements, and the low murmur of conversations. People moved briskly, their faces etched with anticipation, impatience, or exhaustion. Among the crowd was Sophia Carter, an accomplished businesswoman whose very presence seemed to part the sea of travelers. Her sleek, tailored suit and natural elegance made her stand out, yet her demeanor was approachable, exuding both confidence and warmth. Sophia was not an unfamiliar face in first-class lounges or on the priority boarding list. A self-made woman, she had climbed the corporate ladder through hard work, perseverance, and an unshakable belief in her worth. Her work as the CEO of a rising tech company often required travel, but this flight was different. It was a trip born of a personal decision rather than professional necessity, a chance to reconnect with herself after a relentless year. Today, she was heading to a small coastal town where she planned to spend a week in quiet reflection. She had booked first class, not out of vanity, but because she valued her comfort after years of enduring cramped coach seats in her early career days. She earned this luxury, and she cherished it. As Sophia approached the boarding gate, she flashed her boarding pass to the gate agent, who greeted her with a professional smile. "First-class passengers, welcome aboard," the agent said. Sophia offered a polite nod and stepped onto the jet bridge. Her thoughts drifted to her plans for the week, long walks along the beach, evenings spent reading by the fire, and perhaps even a little journaling. The world outside the window of her life had grown chaotic, and she craved peace. Stepping into the plane's first-class cabin, Sophia felt a familiar sense of relief. The plush, oversized seats, the serene ambience, and the attentive service always made the journey feel less like a chore and more like a retreat. She found her seat, 2A, and settled in, placing her tote bag under the seat in front of her. A flight attendant approached, her smile polite but distant. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Can I get you something to drink before takeoff?" she asked, her tone professional. "Sparkling water, please," Sophia replied, leaning back into the seat. She pulled out her e-reader, ready to lose herself in the world of fiction until they reached cruising altitude. The pre-flight preparations continued around her. The other first-class passengers trickled in, businessmen in suits, a couple dressed in designer athleisure, and a mother with her young son who looked thrilled to be sitting in such an exclusive section of the plane. Sophia's mind was elsewhere, her thoughts drifting to the possibilities that awaited her on the ground. Then, the unexpected happened. The flight attendant returned with Sophia's drink, but her demeanor had shifted. Her smile was gone, replaced by a slight frown. "Excuse me, ma'am," she began hesitantly, "I noticed you've made yourself comfortable, but can I confirm you're seated in the correct class?" Sophia blinked, confused. "I believe I am. Here's my boarding pass," she said, handing it over. The flight attendant glanced at it, her frown deepening. "Apologies, but it's standard procedure. I'll just double-check." Sophia's calm exterior remained, but inside, a flicker of irritation sparked. Why was she being singled out? She watched as the flight attendant disappeared toward the back of the cabin, murmuring to another crew member. Moments later, a second flight attendant approached. "Ma'am, we're just making sure everything is in order. There's been some confusion with the seating chart," she explained, though her tone was noticeably colder than before. Sophia could feel the eyes of her fellow passengers on her. She knew this was more than a clerical error. The first time it could have been a mistake, but now it felt deliberate. She crossed her arms, her expression calm but her mind racing. "Is there an issue?" she asked, her voice firm but polite. "No issue," the second flight attendant replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But we need to ensure all passengers are correctly placed." Sophia decided to remain composed. She had experienced moments like this before, microaggressions wrapped in professionalism, indignities hidden behind a veneer of concern. She refused to let them rattle her. Minutes later, the flight attendant returned, boarding pass in hand. "You're all set, ma'am. Enjoy your flight," she said curtly, without a hint of apology. Sophia took her boarding pass back and offered a thin smile. "Thank you," she replied, her tone neutral. She watched as the flight attendant hurried away. She wasn't sure if she was more annoyed or disappointed. This wasn't the first time her presence in spaces reserved for the privileged had been questioned, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. The flight progressed smoothly, but the incident lingered in Sophia's mind. She tried to shake it off, focusing on her book and the view from the window. Yet, the sense of being unjustly singled out nagged at her. When the in-flight entertainment began, she requested a pair of noise-canceling headphones, a standard amenity for first-class passengers. The flight attendant hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we've run out of headphones. Perhaps you could use your own?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Run out?" she asked, glancing around. Other first-class passengers were already wearing their complimentary headphones, engrossed in movies or music. She didn't see anyone else being told the same. "Yes, unfortunately," the attendant replied, her tone clipped. Sophia exhaled slowly. "That's interesting," she said. "I see others have them." The flight attendant's lips tightened. "I'll check again," she said before walking away. Sophia watched her retreating figure, her irritation building. This wasn't about headphones. It was about respect, or the lack thereof. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a paying customer who deserved the same treatment as anyone else in this cabin. As the flight continued, Sophia noticed subtle but undeniable patterns. The crew's demeanor toward her remained standoffish, even as they fawned over other passengers. Each interaction felt like a reminder that, in their eyes, she didn't belong. Sophia didn't confront them. She didn't raise her voice or make a scene. But she made a mental note. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a woman who believed in justice, fairness, and accountability. What they didn't know was that this was far from over. Unbeknownst to the crew, Sophia had a connection to the airline's executive leadership, a connection that would soon prove invaluable. She wasn't just traveling on this flight, she was about to become the catalyst for a lesson in dignity and respect that this crew would never forget. This was only the beginning. The spark of justice. The plane cruised steadily at 35,000 feet, the hum of the engines a soothing background noise. Sophia leaned back in her seat, attempting to immerse herself in her book. Yet, her focus was disrupted by the growing knot in her stomach. Each glance at the flight attendants, each courteous interaction they had with the other first-class passengers, reminded her of the dismissive and subtly antagonistic treatment she had received. She couldn't help but observe the stark difference. The elderly man in 1C was offered a warm towel and an extra glass of champagne with a genuine smile. The young mother across the aisle received additional snacks for her son, the flight attendant crouching beside her seat to ensure her comfort. Yet Sophia, a paying first-class passenger like the rest, had to insist for amenities that should have been offered without question. The headphone incident had left a particularly bitter taste. When the flight attendant finally returned with a pair of headphones, they were presented with an air of reluctance. "Here you go," the attendant said brusquely before moving on without another word. No apology, no acknowledgement of the earlier oversight, just a curt delivery as though Sophia's request had been unreasonable. Sophia's calm exterior belied the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. She had worked too hard and overcome too many barriers to tolerate such treatment. This wasn't just about her, it was about the principle. She thought of others who might have faced similar indignities but didn't have the platform or voice to challenge them. For years, Sophia had been an advocate for equity and inclusion, using her platform to amplify marginalized voices. As a Black woman in a predominantly white, male-dominated industry, she was no stranger to navigating spaces where she was underestimated or overlooked. But this situation felt different. It was personal, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. She decided then and there that she wouldn't let this slide. Sophia pulled out her laptop from her tote bag, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her initial instinct was to draft a formal complaint to the airline's customer relations team, but as she considered her options, a more impactful idea took shape. She didn't just want an apology, she wanted accountability. Sophia had connections that extended far beyond the corporate world. Among her network was a close friend, Vanessa, who happened to be an executive at the airline's headquarters. They had met years ago at a leadership conference and bonded over shared experiences as women of color breaking barriers in their respective fields. Vanessa had often shared stories of her efforts to implement diversity and sensitivity training across the airline's workforce. Sophia's fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard as she composed an email. She detailed the events of the flight with precision, her words carefully chosen to convey the gravity of the situation without resorting to hyperbole. She described the flight crew's dismissive attitude, the unnecessary scrutiny of her boarding pass, and the refusal to provide basic amenities. Most importantly, she emphasized the broader implications of such behavior. Subject: immediate attention required, incident on Flight 872. Dear Vanessa, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing to share a concerning experience I had on my flight today with your airline. As someone who deeply values the principles of equity and fairness, I felt compelled to bring this to your attention. While traveling in first class, I encountered multiple instances of disrespect and discriminatory behavior from the flight crew. From questioning my right to be seated in first class to withholding amenities, the treatment I received stood in stark contrast to the courtesy extended to other passengers. This isn't just about me. It's about ensuring that every passenger, regardless of their background, is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. I trust that you share my commitment to fostering an inclusive environment, and I believe this incident underscores the need for further training and accountability within your team. I'm available to discuss this further at your earliest convenience. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Warm regards. Sophia Carter. Satisfied with the email, Sophia hit send. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her seat, a sense of determination settling over her. She wasn't sure how Vanessa would respond, but she knew she had taken the first step toward addressing the injustice. As the flight neared its destination, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin remained serene. The crew's attitude toward Sophia hadn't improved, but she remained composed. She reminded herself that dignity wasn't just about how others treated her, it was about how she carried herself in the face of adversity. When the plane touched down, Sophia gathered her belongings and exited the aircraft, her mind already racing with plans. She had no intention of letting this matter rest. As she walked through the terminal, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a reply from Vanessa. Subject: immediate attention required, incident on Flight 872. Dear Sophia, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'm deeply troubled by your experience and want to assure you that this matter will be taken seriously. Please allow me some time to investigate. I will personally oversee the follow-up and ensure that appropriate actions are taken. I appreciate your patience and your continued advocacy for fairness. Let's discuss this in more detail soon. Warm regards. Vanessa. Sophia felt a flicker of hope as she read Vanessa's response. She knew her friend's commitment to justice was unwavering. This wasn't just about addressing her personal grievances, it was about creating lasting change. The following week, Sophia received a call from Vanessa. The airline's internal review had revealed troubling patterns of behavior among the crew members in question. Vanessa assured her that disciplinary action would be taken and outlined plans for mandatory sensitivity training for all employees. But Sophia, Vanessa added, her tone serious, I want to do more than just address this incident. Would you be willing to partner with us on a broader initiative to improve our company culture? Your voice and perspective could be invaluable. Sophia felt a surge of gratitude. The experience on the flight had been painful, but it had also sparked an opportunity for meaningful change. I'd be honored, she replied. Sophia's week of reflection by the coast turned into something greater than she had anticipated. Her partnership with the airline led to the creation of a comprehensive inclusion program, touching the lives of employees and passengers alike. And while the flight crew's behavior had been unacceptable, their actions had inadvertently set the stage for a powerful movement toward justice. The journey was far from over, but Sophia had proven once again that resilience and dignity could transform even the most disheartening experiences into catalysts for progress. The reckoning. The sun had set by the time Sophia Carter stepped into the boardroom of the airline's corporate headquarters. The sleek, modern decor of the room, glass walls, polished wood floors, and a long, imposing table, was designed to intimidate, but Sophia was unfazed. She had walked into rooms like this her entire career, often as the only woman, the only person of color, or both. Today, however, she wasn't here as a guest, she was here to make her voice heard. Facing her were the airline's top executives, including CEO Gregory Hawthorne. His reputation preceded him, a shrewd businessman who had steered the company through turbulent times, but one often accused of being out of touch with the human side of his business. Sitting beside him were the airline's chief operating officer, chief human resources officer, and head of customer relations. Each had received a copy of Sophia's detailed report outlining the incident on her flight, supplemented by corroborating statements from other passengers. Sophia's presence was commanding. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, her poise and confidence filled the room. As she took her seat at the head of the table opposite Gregory, she began, "Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice. I appreciate your willingness to address this matter promptly." Gregory nodded curtly, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Carter, your email was concerning, to say the least. We're here to listen." The account. Sophia leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. "Let me begin by saying that I have always been a supporter of your airline. My company has partnered with you for over a decade, and I have personally flown with you numerous times. But my experience on Flight 762 was not just disappointing, it was emblematic of a deeper issue within your organization." She recounted the incident in vivid detail, from the initial denial of the headphones to the subsequent humiliation of having her ticket reconfirmed in front of other passengers. She described the flight attendant's dismissive tone, the supervisor's lack of accountability, and the ripple effect their actions had on the cabin atmosphere. "What struck me most," she said, "was not just the assumption that I didn't belong in first class, but the refusal to acknowledge the harm caused even after it became clear they were wrong. This was not an isolated incident, it was a reflection of systemic bias." The evidence. Sophia's assistant, seated discreetly in the corner, handed out copies of a report she had compiled. It included passenger statements, quotes from multiple first-class passengers who witnessed the incident, including the man across the aisle who had spoken up. Policy review, a comparison of the airline's customer service policies versus their execution, highlighting gaps in training and accountability. Social media monitoring, screenshots of tweets and posts from other passengers who had shared their outrage about the incident online, some of which had already begun to go viral. Gregory flipped through the report, his frown deepening with each page. The COO cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, we take these allegations seriously. But I must ask, what outcome are you seeking here?" Sophia's gaze locked onto his. "Change. Real, tangible change. This is not just about me or about this flight. It's about ensuring your company lives up to the standards it claims to uphold. It's about respect and dignity for every passenger, regardless of race, gender, or status." The proposal. Sophia pulled out another document. "Here are my recommendations," she said, sliding it across the table. "They're non-negotiable if my company is to consider renewing its partnership with your airline." The executives exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing as she continued. "Mandatory diversity and sensitivity training. Your staff needs comprehensive training to recognize and counteract unconscious bias. This isn't a one-time workshop, it's an ongoing program. Revised customer service protocols. Your policies must be clear and equitable, with accountability measures in place to ensure they're followed. Incident reporting system, a transparent system for passengers to report grievances, with a guaranteed follow-up timeline and resolution process. Diversity in leadership. Your leadership team does not reflect the diversity of your customer base. This needs to change if you want to build a culture of inclusion from the top down. Public accountability. This incident has already gained public attention. I expect a formal acknowledgement from your company, along with a plan for addressing systemic issues. The tension builds. The room fell silent as the executives digested her demands. Gregory leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. These are ambitious suggestions, he said finally. Implementing them will take time and resources. Sophia's lips curled into a faint smile. With respect, Mr. Hawthorne, the cost of not implementing them will be far greater. In today's world, reputation is everything. If this incident continues to escalate in the public sphere, it could cost your airline millions in lost revenue and tarnished credibility. Her assistant chimed in, our legal team has already prepared a formal statement addressing this incident. If you're willing to collaborate, we can frame this as a turning point for your airline, a commitment to improvement rather than a stain on your record. Gregory's eyes narrowed. It was clear he wasn't accustomed to being cornered. But he also knew when he was outmaneuvered. We'll need to review this internally, he said. But I'm open to further discussions. The turning point. As the meeting concluded, Sophia stood, extending her hand to Gregory. I'm not here to tear your company down, she said. I'm here because I believe in its potential to do better. Don't waste this opportunity. Gregory hesitated for a moment before shaking her hand. Message received, he said. As Sophia walked out of the boardroom, she felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The fight wasn't over, but she had made her point, loud and clear. This wasn't just about one flight or one woman. It was about changing a culture, one step at a time. The ripple effect of her actions had only just begun. As the doors closed behind her, she knew that the real work was still ahead, not just for the airline, but for everyone who dared to challenge the status quo. The ripple of a single action. Sophia Carter sat quietly in her first-class seat, the hum of the aircraft engines a steady background to her thoughts. The warmth of the cabin lights highlighted her composed demeanor, even as the tension around her thickened. Moments ago, her simple request for a pair of noise-canceling headphones had ignited a series of events that revealed much more than she anticipated. A sudden shift in the atmosphere. When the flight attendant, a stern-looking woman named Clara, approached Sophia earlier, her tone was laced with condescension. I'm sorry, ma'am, but those are reserved for first-class passengers, Clara had said, not even bothering to look directly at Sophia. Sophia tilted her head, her expression calm yet piercing. I am in first class, she replied, gesturing to the seat beneath her. The surrounding passengers, mostly engrossed in their pre-flight rituals, now began to glance her way. Whispers started to ripple through the cabin. Clara's face tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She didn't apologize, nor did she clarify her assumption. Instead, she muttered something inaudible and walked away, leaving Sophia with a hollow feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just the denial of headphones, it was the implication, the undertone that suggested she didn't belong. A test of poise and dignity. Minutes passed, and Clara returned, this time accompanied by another flight attendant and a supervisor. Sophia was asked, in a hushed but pointed tone, to reconfirm her ticket. The supervisor, a balding man with a clipboard, avoided eye contact as he made the request. Sophia smiled faintly, though her heart pounded in her chest. She handed over her boarding pass without hesitation. Perhaps there's been some confusion, she said, her voice steady. The supervisor examined the boarding pass, his expression unreadable. Everything checks out, he said after a pause, handing it back. But rather than apologizing, he added, it's just protocol. I hope you understand. Sophia's fingers tightened around the boarding pass. She had spent years building her career, breaking barriers in corporate America, and fighting stereotypes in boardrooms. Yet here she was, on a routine flight, being subjected to the same dismissive assumptions she thought she had left behind. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned her gaze to the window, her reflection staring back at her, calm and composed. An ally emerges. Just as Sophia thought the ordeal might subside, a voice from across the aisle broke the silence. This is ridiculous, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit said loudly. His sharp British accent carried over the cabin's hum. He set down his laptop and fixed the crew with a stern look. "She's sitting here in first class, isn't she? What more do you need to see?" The crew hesitated, their authority momentarily shaken. Clara mumbled something about verifying protocols, but the man wasn't having it. "I've flown enough to know when someone is being singled out," he said. "And let me tell you, this doesn't look good." Sophia turned to the man, nodding her thanks. The passengers around her started murmuring louder now, the mood shifting. What began as quiet observation turned into vocal support. "Why not just apologize and give her the headphones?" a woman in a floral scarf said from a few rows back. "This is first class, not some exclusive club," another passenger added. "What are you even arguing about?" The breaking point. Clara's face flushed, but instead of backing down, she snapped. "We're simply following procedure," she said, her voice tight. "If you have any issues, I suggest you file a complaint after the flight." Sophia had had enough. She rose from her seat, her movements deliberate. "I will be filing a complaint," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But let's not forget one thing, you're not just representing yourself. You're representing this airline." The ripple of her words was instantaneous. Clara opened her mouth to retort but thought better of it. The supervisor, sensing the growing tension, intervened. "Let's all calm down," he said, his tone placating. "We'll provide the headphones, no problem." But it was too late. The damage had been done. Sophia sat back down, accepting the headphones when they were finally brought to her. The flight continued, but the energy in the cabin was irrevocably altered. The aftermath in the air. Sophia spent the rest of the flight reflecting. She wasn't angry anymore, just deeply disappointed. Her mind wandered to the countless times she had faced similar moments, microaggressions dressed as misunderstandings, biases disguised as protocol. But Sophia was no longer the young woman who let these moments slide. She was now a force to be reckoned with, and she had the resources to ensure this incident wouldn't go unnoticed. As the plane began its descent, she pulled out her phone and typed an email. She wasn't just a passenger, she was an influential figure in the corporate world, someone with a network that stretched across industries. Her words carried weight, and she intended to use them. The twist of fate. Unbeknownst to the crew, Sophia was more than just a first-class passenger. She was a board member for one of the airline's largest corporate partners. Her presence on this flight wasn't incidental, it was strategic. She had been conducting a low-key assessment of the airline's customer service for her company, which was considering renewing a multi-million-dollar contract with them. By the time the flight landed, Sophia's email had reached the airline's CEO, along with several board members. Her detailed account of the incident, combined with witness statements from other passengers, set off a chain reaction. The consequences. What followed was swift and decisive. Within hours, the crew on that flight was placed under investigation. Clara and the supervisor were suspended, pending further review. The airline issued a formal apology to Sophia, though the damage to their reputation was already unfolding. But Sophia wasn't satisfied with just an apology. She requested a meeting with the airline's leadership, emphasizing the need for systemic changes in their training and hiring practices. She didn't just want justice for herself, she wanted to ensure that no one else would endure the same experience. Justice takes flight. Sophia Carter stood poised at the door of the aircraft, her gaze steady and unwavering. The atmosphere inside the plane buzzed with an intensity that hung heavy in the air, a mix of curiosity, guilt, and awe. The remaining flight crew, the passengers, and even the captain seemed unable to meet her eyes, as though the events of the last several hours weighed down upon them. Sophia, however, radiated calm authority. As the private investigators and legal advisors she'd called for began their work, documenting every aspect of the incident, Sophia reflected on how a simple flight had become a microcosm of societal inequities she'd worked her whole life to dismantle. The ripple effect. The moment Sophia exited the first-class cabin hours earlier, it wasn't to retreat but to gather reinforcements. Her impeccable connections and unshakable resolve had brought in an immediate response. The airline CEO, awoken by an urgent call, had personally authorized a full review of the flight. This wasn't merely about Sophia anymore, it was about systemic change. Sophia had been preparing for a fight like this her entire career. As the founder of a globally recognized equity and inclusion firm, her life's work revolved around dismantling discrimination and ensuring fair treatment in workplaces, schools, and public services. Her success was rooted not just in her expertise, but in her personal experiences, and today's incident had only reinforced her belief that much work remained to be done. The confrontation. The lead flight attendant, whose initial dismissiveness and discriminatory actions had set the chain of events in motion, now stood in the galley, flanked by airline representatives who had been rushed to the scene. She avoided Sophia's gaze, her earlier arrogance replaced by evident discomfort. Sophia approached her with the same poise she had displayed throughout the ordeal. "I believe we need to have a conversation," Sophia began, her voice calm but firm. The attendant stammered, "I didn't mean." "Intent doesn't erase impact," Sophia interrupted. "You acted on biases that have no place in any workplace, much less one that serves the public. The decisions you made weren't just about me, they reflected a broader attitude toward anyone you perceive as less than." The attendant's silence was deafening. The CEO's call. Meanwhile, the airline's CEO had requested to speak directly with Sophia. A secure video call was set up in the first-class lounge upon landing. The CEO, visibly shaken by the unfolding events, began with an apology. "Ms. Carter, I am deeply sorry for what you've experienced today. This is not the standard we uphold, and I assure you, we will take immediate action." Sophia nodded, listening intently. "An apology is a start, but it's not enough. I want accountability. Not just for the crew on this flight, but a commitment to systemic changes. Training programs, audits, and measurable outcomes to ensure this doesn't happen again, not to me, not to anyone." The CEO hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. "We'll collaborate with your team, Ms. Carter. Your work in this field speaks for itself. Let's turn this into a learning moment for our airline and the industry." The crew's fate. As the flight crew awaited their fate, rumors swirled among passengers and staff. While Sophia had no intention of being vindictive, she insisted on fair consequences. Those involved in discriminatory actions were immediately suspended pending further investigation. The airline announced plans to implement Sophia's equity and inclusion framework across their operations, a groundbreaking initiative that would set a new industry standard. The speech that mattered. Before leaving the airport, Sophia addressed the remaining passengers in the first-class lounge. "What happened today isn't just my story," she began, her voice carrying both strength and vulnerability. "It's a reflection of challenges faced by many, every day, in every corner of our world. We have a responsibility to confront these biases, to speak up when we see injustice, and to demand better from those in power." Her words were met with applause, a spontaneous reaction from people moved by her resilience and leadership. A legacy of change. In the weeks that followed, Sophia's story became a catalyst for change. Media outlets covered the incident, not for its drama, but for its resolution. Sophia's collaboration with the airline became a blueprint for addressing discrimination in service industries. The crew members who showed accountability and a willingness to learn were offered opportunities to participate in the new equity program, while those who resisted faced appropriate consequences. The airline's public commitment to inclusivity won back the trust of its passengers, though Sophia knew this was only the beginning. Moving forward. Sophia boarded her next flight weeks later, this time on another airline. She was greeted warmly by the crew, their demeanor a stark contrast to what she had faced before. As the plane ascended into the clouds, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. It wasn't about revenge or proving her worth. It was about creating a world where everyone could move through life with dignity and respect, no matter their seat, status, or skin color. And as Sophia leaned back, a faint smile on her lips, she knew her work was far from over, but the journey was worth it.